you've seen a lot. You've been through a lot in umpteen years of ministry. Um, how did you start Immanuel in your 50s? That's a pretty fearless thing to do in my book. You got to be pretty courageous to start a church in your 50s.
Yeah. Uh, Thank you, Jonathan. Very kind, but you're wrong. I wasn't courageous. I was cornered. In fact, I was terrified. I had just experienced a ministry heartbreak, a kind of once in a lifetime catastrophic disaster. And I say I was terrified, Jonathan, because I was so shaken by that experience and things that were said and done that I wondered if God had forsaken me. I wondered, have I done something that is so shockingly offensive to him that he just wants to take me out? Does God hate my guts? That would explain everything. So obviously, I had to rethink everything at a primal level, even deeper than foundation. So I did. And by God's grace, I eventually sort of circled back to believe that God does love me. And maybe I have a future worth reaching for. So it wasn't a great act of courage. What happened, Jonathan, is that there were some very faithful, wonderful, tenderhearted, steady Christian friends. First and foremost, my very wife, who is, talk about gospel solidarity. I could not have gotten through that without her and those other friends. Jonathan, it was brotherly solidarity that got me through. So Immanuel Church was born out of loss and bewilderment and not just daring to rethink everything, having to rethink everything. And so we decided, let's not take what I call typical church and just take that and sort of tweak it and upgrade it. Let's dare to rethink everything and let's dare to reach for the kind of church that we ourselves would really love to join. A church where people are going to be treated really well. And nobody has to wonder what's going to blindside me if I go to this church. The word safe, the word safety is overused in our cultural discourse, but there is a real and legitimate safety that sinful human beings need and deserve in order to rethink their lives. We need a place where we can exhale, calm down, and in an unpressured, unhurried manner, rethink everything. So we, by God's grace alone, for his glory alone, we decided, what if we build out a church that might be something like that, imperfect but authentic, and it worked. Jonathan, the truth of it is, brother, the best therapy I ever experienced was going to church for 11 years at Immanuel Nashville. And I was among friends. They liked me. They weren't trying to fix me. They kind of enjoyed having me around. And that gave me the space and the calm to rebuild my life. So that's the truth of it. You're very kind, but that's what actually happened.
Chuck Swindoll once said that when God has an impossible task, he takes an impossible man and crushes him. And it sounds like you went through the crushing.
Yeah.
How did you heal or how did you rebound from that, from that place of despair to a place where you're maybe a wounded healer?
Yeah. This is a little cheesy and formulaic, but as I struggled with that very question, this simple formula kind of emerged: gospel plus safety plus time. Gospel, good news for bad people through Christ crucified. I need that every day. Everybody does. We wanted every service to be an experience of the gospel, the message of the gospel, and the relationships called for by the gospel. Good news for bad people through Christ crucified, plus safety, where people can actually open up and take the risk of being transparent and vulnerable. Gospel plus safety plus time. God is not standing over you and me and our friends listening to this podcast. He's not standing there with a stopwatch. Click. Okay, come on. Get sanctified. I don't have all day. It's not like that. Oh, Jonathan, I was with David Powlison, the biblical counselor, who was a dear friend. We showed up for a TGC meeting early, and the two of us were there alone before anybody else showed up. And he had walked with me through those really, really hard years. And he asked me that day as we sat there, how are you doing with all that? And I had to admit to him, it still eats at me. I'm embarrassed, but it does. You know what he said? 3 words: God is patient. And when we have that moment of, oh, that's when God's grace flows in and great things happen. So the path I took in answer to your wonderful question was very simple. It had to be simple if it was going to work for me. Gospel plus safety plus time.
What did it look like in those early years of a new church? What did it look like to be in a position where you had to make decisions once again? You had to make business decisions. You had to make, I mean, you're creating something from scratch. You know, what does our membership process look like? What is the format of Sunday morning? How does that flow? How did you get yourself back in the saddle again? And what did that season kind of look like for you?
Well, that's a great question. I think a very incomplete answer, but an honest answer, Jonathan, would be, we kept asking the question, what would we build out? What could we build out here in a membership process, for example, a worship service? What could we build out that we would actually enjoy? And I don't mean just shallow and frothy giddiness, but honest and deeply felt enjoyment. No pretense, no big dealness. We're not trying to impress anybody. This is going to be real, and we're going to, by God's grace, let's not feel any artificial self-imposed burden to be better than any other church or to be oh so correct. Let's just enjoy this. Wasn't it Augustine who said we have basically 2 kinds of relationships: enjoying and using? And between those two, obviously the higher, more exalted, more saintly kind of relationship is enjoyment. The Shorter Catechism. What is the chief end of man? Man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy him forever. That's very Augustinian. It's biblical. It's throughout the Psalms. Angry orthodoxy is life depleting. Silly, frothy, giggly church light is also life depleting. Reverent, relaxed enjoyment of the Lord Jesus Christ honors him and is life-giving. We stop playing games. And our hearts crack open deep inside. The Spirit of God begins to take over. Wow. You and I both know there's nothing greater.
Wow, that's so good. One of the things I've learned from you that I really appreciate is the beauty of a gospel culture in your church. And that may be a new term for some of our listeners, gospel culture. Would you kind of sketch out for us what is a gospel culture? What does that look like?
Thank you. That is so precious to me and so very meaningful. It's what the Lord gave us at Immanuel. Well, here are these two categories, two big buckets: gospel doctrine, gospel culture. Gospel doctrine is a message. It is the message of Scripture from cover to cover, good news for bad people through Christ. But that message it's not meant to hang in midair merely as a doctrinal abstraction, however correct. A box to check. Now, the very fact that I'm talking about doctrine means it is sacred, it is precious. I revere gospel doctrine. I hope I would die for it. I don't agree with those who say it doesn't really matter what we believe as long as we love each other. Excuse me, that is a belief. And it's not biblical, and it can't sustain love. It really matters what we believe. But it's not meant merely to be a concept. That doctrine, when we allow it in our churches to exert its natural and intended authority and force, creates a culture. The doctrine is a message. The culture is an experience, a shared experience, an embodied experience in a particular church when they get together. I mean, so we all know what it's like to walk into a room and there are a bunch of people there who are friends, or maybe enemies for that matter. We're not just walking into this group of people, we're walking into a culture. Even if they're fighting over something that they agree to is worthy of fighting about. So if you walk into a fraternity party, you're walking into a culture. If you walk into a corporate boardroom, you're walking into a culture. If you walk into a family in their home, it's a culture. And every church is communicating at two levels simultaneously. What it says is its message. What it is its culture. If we are not alert to the two levels of communication that every church is declaring every time it gathers, both the message and the culture, then it's possible for a church to declare the truth in its message and a heresy in its culture without even realizing it. For example, and it's a terrible old photograph from, I think, Portland, Oregon in the 1920s that I use when I talk about this because it just makes the issue so clear. It's a photograph of a church sanctuary taken from the back, and we're looking toward the front, and there is the pulpit, and there's the minister standing there, and there's, I think, like a choir behind him. And on the wall, on the far wall, up behind the pulpit and the minister and the choir, there's a banner, Jesus saves. Now, that's the doctrine of that church. You and I love that doctrine. We believe that. Sign us up, right? But there's a problem in that church because down in front of the minister, standing in front of the pulpit across the church, you can see some of the members of the congregation there. Standing there are members of the Klan in their white robes. And they're being recognized and apparently honored in this church service. Now, that church is communicating at two levels simultaneously. Its doctrine is Jesus saves. That's the truth. Its culture, what it is, what it embodies, denies that very doctrine. Jesus saves if you're white, then you get the full meal deal. If you're not white, not so much. And that's just like Galatians 2, 11 through 21, where the Apostle Paul chews out the Apostle Peter for requiring of Gentile converts that they go back to the kosher dietary laws of the Old Testament. Peter was saying, on this jet airliner that we're taken to heaven, from earth to heaven, you've got the first class section up front with prior boarding and extra legroom for the kosher Christians who keep the Levitical dietary restrictions. They believe in Jesus, but they got this, they're just a cut above everybody else. And the rest of y'all back in, you're riding coach, all crammed in there. Those are the Gentiles. I mean, you're going to heaven, but look, if you would just adapt to us and our kosher laws, you could move up to first class. And Paul gets up in Peter's face and says, in effect, follow the argument there in Galatians 2. He says, Peter, you're denying the doctrine of justification by faith alone. Not because your teaching is wrong. Paul says, when I saw that their conduct was not in step with the truth of the gospel. When Peter preached, Paul heard the gospel. When Peter distanced himself from the Gentiles, Paul saw a departure from the gospel. Peter didn't even realize it. And Jonathan and all our friends are, listen, guys, we've just got to attend to both the message that people hear and the culture that people see. And when the when the doctrine is really creating the culture, the culture is not just laid on top of the doctrine, but the doctrine is coming through the culture. Bam! That is a powerful church. I'm sorry to go on at such length, man.
No,
I'll shut off in just a minute, okay? Okay, sidebar. Romans 15:7. I love this verse. Therefore, welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God. And that's where that might be the central verse or the key verse in the whole book of Romans. Therefore, here's how 14 plus chapters of doctrine lands on a truly gospel-centered church. Here's what happens. We welcome one another. How could we not? Welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you. Jonathan, 14 plus chapters of robust theology can be summarized in 4 words. Christ has welcomed you. He doesn't just tolerate you with an eye roll. He says, come on in here with a great big bear hug. Christ has welcomed you. Welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you. So the doctrine is Christ has welcomed you. The culture is welcome one another. And when we welcome one another as Christ has welcomed us, guess what? It says for the glory of God. The glory of God rests upon that church. And it's publicly obvious.
That's so good. So if I'm a church leader and I have an existing church and I desire to move it in the direction of a gospel culture, what are maybe some practical steps, or what does it look like to lead in the direction of, hey, we're gonna have a gospel formed culture here?
Yeah. That is a really, really important question. And there's no, one size fits all answer. And it kind of depends on how traditional the church is. And I don't mean traditional meaning just singing hymns, but some churches have a very strong self-understanding built up over many, many decades. And they honestly, with good hearts, don't see the disconnect between their culture and the doctrine that they love. In that case, I think a wise pastor and a humble pastor will say, okay, it's a privilege to be the pastor of this church. The Lord has sent me here. I'm not going to whip these people into shape. I'm going to give this 20 years. I'm not going to be impatient. The Lord has never been impatient with me. I'm going to be patient. I can see that the gap between where we are and where the Lord would really want us to be. And it's going to take 20 years to turn the corner on this. So first of all, no crisis. I'm not going to bully anybody. I'm not going to force a big moment of decision when everything has to get fixed in one dramatic moment. I'm going to relax and enjoy this. My dad used to say, you have goals and you have the process to accomplish the goal. If all you enjoy is the final accomplishment of the goal, and if you resent the process, you're going to hate the ministry. But if you enjoy the process as well as arriving at the goal, you're going to love the ministry. So let's not set ourselves up and our churches for failure. Let's enjoy the process with patience. That's step one. Step two. Every time when you're preaching through books of the Bible, every time the Bible talks about instantiating or embodying or manifesting, incorporating the truth of the gospel in our corporate life together, ring the bell on that. I was just looking the other day at a scholarly work on Romans, and wouldn't you know, I can't think of the author right now, but he says Romans 15:7 is the key verse in the book. Jonathan, I remember seeing an ad for British Airways, and it was a map of the Western Hemisphere, and here's the little island of Britain there, and Heathrow Airport in the southeast part of that island, and all these lines from other countries, other airports, were converging on Heathrow. That's a picture of the book of Romans. As you preach through Romans, and God does great things, Romans is a revival conducive book. As you preach through Romans, don't preach piecemeal. Every Sunday, keep connecting the dots from all these different angles with the Heathrow of Romans, which is chapter 15, verse 7. That's where Paul is going. A church where people welcome one another. They don't just say hi in the parking lot on the way into the sanctuary. There's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't work in the verse. Say hi to one another as Christ has said hi to you. Doesn't work. In fact, the NIV actually does not help. It says, accept one another. as Christ has accepted you? I can accept, Jonathan, I could accept you with an eye roll. It doesn't work. Accept one another with an eye roll as Christ has accepted you with an eye roll. The verb is proslambano. Welcome is the stronger, more faithful translation. He doesn't tolerate us. He welcomes us. Come on in. I'm happier with you in my life. Oh, Jonathan, what if we walk into church with that heart? And how can we not? Anyway, preaching through Romans, realize every passage along the way it's like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I mean, there are a lot of subplots along the way, but it's going somewhere. Keep connecting the dots wherever you are with with verse 7 of chapter 15. And the argument becomes very, very strong in its cumulative force. And people will be sitting there in the congregation Sunday after Sunday and thinking, never thought of it that way. That's a good point. And just slowly, gently, no crisis, the mentality of the entire congregation or most of the congregation shifts. And a spirit of welcome comes down from above and great things happen.
So when it comes to preaching, which you have a lot of experience in, and we have younger guys listening who carry that weekly weight of communicating the message, what is it? What are some, I guess, what are some tips that you've learned along the way for approaching the pulpit, for engaging the text? What are some ways that would help us become more fearless in the proclamation?
Wow, that really matters. It reminds me of Ephesians chapter 6. Paul asked for prayer. He says, and also pray for me, that words may be given to me in opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. Brother, we can't preach the gospel timidly. Now, boldly does not mean screaming at people. Boldly does not mean challenging people. When I've preached and somebody comes up to me afterwards and they're very kind, very loving, they say, "Oh, Pastor, what a challenging message." I always want to say, "Oh, really? I'm sorry. Oh, let's go back and do that again. I didn't mean." Jesus did not say, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you a challenge." He said, "I will give you rest." So boldly means I'm not going to shave the radical edge off this message. It is so good. It is so radiant. It is so bright and winsome and a fearless message. Christ crucified and risen again must be preached fearlessly. So let's be bold. And as we preach that bold message, now this is going to sound crazy, especially after what I just said. But one of the biggest mistakes I made for the first several decades of my ministry was I honestly thought preaching would accomplish everything. Now, I'm a huge believer in preaching. But there's preaching and there's pastoring. Preaching communicates gospel doctrine. Pastoring nurtures gospel culture. And every service on a Sunday or whenever it is should include both gospel doctrine and gospel culture. So, for example, let's say I preach, a Psalm or John chapter 6 or Ephesians chapter 4, And I preach my heart out and I preach boldly as best I can. Realizing on Monday, I'm gonna be completely disheartened. And every Monday, I don't know about you, Jonathan, but every Monday I sat there sucking my thumb thinking, nobody's coming back next Sunday. I mean, I stink at this. Then Tuesday morning, go do it again. Start the run that lap one more time. That's fine. But in every service, both the doctrine preached and the culture experienced. So, for example, maybe before the sermon, or maybe after the sermon, or during the sermon, at some other place in the service, lead the congregation into an experience of gospel culture. For example, my eyes are peeled, as I'm looking at the congregation throughout the week, and I'm aware, here's a family over here that has really been through it. Man, they have suffered and they have just held on to the Lord for dear life. He's gotten them through it. So what I do is I reach out to the head of that house and ask, could I interview you on next Sunday morning? And could we talk about this and just talk it through and pray it through? And if they're agreeable, then at some point in the service, whenever it fits best, just gently invite them forward and explain, as many of you are aware, our dear friends here have just gotten through quite a significant personal ordeal, and just do an interview, 3 minutes maybe. And what happened? How did the Lord help you? What's a takeaway that you'd want to share with us from that experience? And when one family or one individual in that big group is noticed, honored, high-fived, fist bump, way to go, embraced. When one person is seen, everybody sitting there feels more seen. Everybody realizes, oh, individuals matter around here. We're not just cogs in somebody's religious wheel. We're individuals who are noticed and valued. That's the point. So we share an experience together, an experience in Christ. And maybe the difficulty is still unresolved. And maybe the whole point of that encounter in front of the church is prayer and seeking the Lord. And lifting those people up, helping them, encouraging them, comforting, strengthening. Maybe it's a serviceman from home on leave from the Marines, and he hasn't been here in 9 months, and you see him in the congregation, and on the fly, you ask him, would you mind? Could we have a couple of minutes? I'd love to catch up, and just invite him forward. I mean, there are so many scenarios where, without scolding anybody, but with loving people, by loving people, we can just spread the heartening experience of gospel culture and just give it time.
Through Renewal Ministries, one of your initiatives right now is Strengthen Your Brothers, where you invite a couple pastors in that are younger in their years, and you spend the day with them, pouring into them. I had the privilege of experiencing that recently. I'm sure you hear a lot of stories. What should we be on the lookout for in this day and age of ministry? What are you seeing or sensing that we should be, have on our radar?
Yeah, that's a profound question, brother. I remember 1968. I remember the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. I remember the assassination of Robert Kennedy and the other sort of culturally intense experiences and traumas of that year. But what we're going through as a nation right now is not just more difficult, I think it's far more difficult. I think we have some dark days ahead. Couple of thoughts. One, okay, bring it on. Whatever lies ahead, brother, is the whole reason why we're here. God brought us into history right on time to be who we are, where we are, in Christ, to make a vital contribution in our moment, in our nation, in our location, and so forth. And we're more ready than we feel. The Lord has been preparing us and shaping us all our lives for whatever lies ahead. I love the cheerful defiance of Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? We Christians, we are not cowards. We're not bracing ourselves against what might be next. We're not nervously wondering what if. We are confidently thinking, even if. And my recommendation is that we face the realities of the future as they come at us with our Bibles open, a spirit of openness and humility, Hebrews 11 faith, which is not a virtue. The faith of Hebrews 11 is simply receptivity, openness. The whole point of Hebrews 11 is people, they experience tremendous breakthroughs and deliverances and victories by faith. And they suffered and went through horrible setbacks and defeats by faith. We're walking through life with the empty hands of faith held out before the risen Christ. We have our Bibles open, we're thinking biblically, and then the final thing I recommend is let's just not get weird. All fanaticism, all extremism, especially in over-politicized Christianity, that would play right into the enemy's hands. So let's park our politics at the door when we go into church every Sunday. Lift up Christ, not freak out, communicate confidence to the people, confidence in the Lord. And, you know, Jonathan, with any luck, we'll all die in prison. That would be a great privilege. If we perceive suffering as privilege, we become, by God's grace, an unstoppable force for the gospel. But let's not get weird and extreme and just angry. How does that strike you?
No, I love that. That's equally challenging and hopeful. It was your father who said, I can't remember the full quote, but he said, live dangerously.
Yeah.
And that's what I think of.
Yeah. He said, live dangerously and give your heart away. Yeah, let's not try to hang on to the past. Let's build for the future.
Wow. Ray, how do we find you online? We have listeners that need to connect with you, that need to learn from you. How do we find you?
You know, I should know the answer to that, but I'm so sort of technologically challenged. I know I'm on Instagram and I'm on Threads. We have a website, renewalministries.com.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Oh, okay.
I highly recommend that you check out Ray's ministry at renewalministries.com. Strengthen Your Brothers, in particular, is a fantastic resource to the body of Christ.
John, it was so great to have you here. Thank you for making the effort to come. Thank you for making that commitment. You made it better.
Well, you're too kind. Because I felt like I was sitting at the feet of the master. That was fantastic.
You need to get out more, brother.
Oh, Ray, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And Ray Ortlund, everybody, you need to Google him, look him up.